Well, our next speaker is Tricia Niel with Alpha International. Tricia, come on up here. Where are you? There you are.
Thank you so much, and it's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for inviting Alpha to be part of the Barnabas Group. As Dan said, my name is Tricia Niel, and I live in London and work in London, and I'm president of Alpha International. I was brought up as a child going to church. My parents took me to church every Sunday. I went to Sunday school and the youth club. But when I got to 18 and I went away to university, I made a conscious decision that God was not for me, church was not for me, and I was going to lead my life my own way, and that's actually how it was for the next 20 years. After university, I went off to live in the Middle East, and if I'm honest, I lived an incredible party life and got into difficult relationships and really made a complete and utter mess of my life. In the early 1990s, I decided that I really needed to escape, especially a difficult relationship, and decided to go back to the UK. I was being headhunted at that time. When I was in the Middle East, I was working with Shell, but I was being headhunted to work with News International, with Rupert Murdoch, to help set up a new division for him in London. And so here I was, I arrived in London. I'd never lived there before, and I found it an incredibly big, lonely city. And I was slightly wounded, I was disappointed with the way my life had worked out, but I was desperate to make friends and to fit in and to be part of a community. And it was while I was there and searching and struggling, I met the first Christian that I had done in the last 20 years, which goes to show what sort of life I was living. I played tennis every Saturday at a little club called Wimbledon, and I met somebody called Jean, and I was telling her of my struggles of trying to meet people, and she said to me, "Why don't you come to this thing at our church? It's called the Alpha Course, and it's a great opportunity for you. You'll love it because you'll meet some nice people, you'll get a nice meal," and you can see I enjoy eating, "and then you'll hear a little talk." And I thought to myself, why on earth would I want to go to a church to hear something? I've got no interest in God. I hadn't given God a thought for the last 20 years. But you know, she positioned it so easily for me, because she said, just come. If you don't like it, you never ever have to come back. And nobody's going to ring you, nobody's going to chase you, and you just have to decide at the end of the evening whether you would like to come back or not. And so I went along to an Alpha evening, and she was absolutely right. There was a very nice group of people. We sat together on a table, just like we've been doing tonight. We got to know one another a little bit. We ate a nice meal. And then somebody called Nicky Gumbel got up and spoke. And he spoke on Christianity, boring, untrue, irrelevant, ? And I did not like the talk. And I think it was because my life was so far removed from what he was talking about. And at the end of the evening, I said to my friend Jean, "You said that if I didn't want to come back, that I didn't have to." And I said to her, "I so didn't enjoy it. Please don't ever mention it to me again." And I thought I had got away with it. But about 3 weeks later, I was coming out of my house and I saw my neighbour across the road. She had just had a baby, she and her husband, and I went across to congratulate her. And she told me, as I went across, she actually burst into tears and was crying. And I said, this is the mother rather than the baby. And I said to her, Julia, what on earth is the matter? This should be the happiest time of your life. And she started to tell me that she'd found out on the day that she had gone in to give birth to her child, her first child, that her husband had been having an affair with his secretary for the whole previous last year, and her life was in ruins. And I desperately wanted to help her. I had been in a relationship where there had been no trust, and so I felt great compassion for her. And I said, Julia, don't worry, all your friends like me, we're going to look after you, and we'll take care of you. And she said to me, Trish, you're just like all my other friends. You're the icing on the cake. You're a party girl. You have no idea what to do. And I looked at her, and suddenly, coming out of my mouth, were these words. Julia, why don't you go on the Alpha course? And then I heard myself say, if you would like to go, I'll go with you. So I went along week 1 of Alpha, and I joined a small group. There were about 12 of us in this group, and 3 of the people in the group were hosting and facilitating. And for the rest of the course, which is a 10-week course, I was in that same group, and we ate together, and we heard a talk each week. Who is Jesus? Why did Jesus die? How and why should I pray? And week by week, this group became the closest of friends for me. And they became my community in London. And I had this huge sense of belonging before believing. And what was so wonderful about this small group is that every week we met, same group over 10 weeks, we ate together, we heard a talk, and then we went into a small group, the same small group, to discuss. And what I noticed is that nobody ever answered my question. And they allowed me to say whatever I wanted, and to be cross or angry, and to say whatever I wanted. And any question I asked, one of the leaders would say, that's very interesting, Trish. What does anybody else think or feel? And they were allowing everybody else in the small group to say what they felt or what they had believed, because they had already preached the gospel by the talk that we had heard just previously. And you know, for me, in the middle of Alpha, about halfway through the course, there is a session on the person and work of the Holy Spirit. And for me, that was the time when everything that I had heard in my head shifted to my heart. And I knew I wanted a new life, and I wanted to start all over again. And I knew that the only way to do that was to go to Jesus and to give my life to him. And that happened in February of 1993. And, you know, since then, Alpha was running in one church at the time. Holy Trinity Brompton is an Anglican church in the centre of London. It's London, for many of you know, is a secular environment. Only 5% of people go to church in the UK. And here was this one course that was encouraging people like me to explore the meaning of life and to find Jesus. And over the course of the last 20 years, it's been just an extraordinary privilege to be part of this ministry and to see what God has done. Now, all around the world, there are 24 million people like myself who've done the Alpha course in 169 countries worldwide. And last year alone, 87,000 courses were running around the world. And what we have seen is just incredible unity in the church, because every different denomination has been running Alpha. Presbyterians, Anglicans, Baptists, Vineyards, Free Church, you name it. And the Catholic Church have been really endorsing Alpha over the last few years. You know, it was wonderful because the last Pope said that his church had been sacramentalized but not evangelized. And there was this huge opportunity for the Catholic Church to reach out to the people in their church to really show them what it was like to have a relationship with Jesus. And we're just so excited that the Catholic Church, along with all the other church denominations, have taken Alpha. And, you know, a few years ago, the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, the Catholic Archbishop of Buenos Aires, was coming home in a bus in Argentina, and he met one of my colleagues, a girl called Karen, who was on the bus, and she was my Alpha representative out there in Argentina. And she told him all about Alpha. And at the end of the bus journey, he said to her, he took her face in his hands and he said, "Karen, I can see that you love Jesus. And because of that, I'm going to send 4 of my Catholic bishops to your Anglican church in London to learn about Alpha so that they can bring it back to the parishes in Argentina where we need this course desperately." And imagine, you know, what it was like 2 years ago, last year, when the curtain opened in Rome, when the new Pope was announced, and this little man came out, and the world went silent because nobody really knew who this new Pope was, because he was a complete rank outsider. And I got a text, and it was from Karen in Argentina saying, "That is the Catholic Archbishop of Buenos Aires, who is now Pope Francis." And just 2 or 3 weeks ago, Nicky Gumbel and I went over to Rome with the Archbishop of Canterbury to speak to the Pope about Alpha and how it can be used in the Catholic Church. And we're just seeing incredible things around the world. In India, you know, over just a few years ago, 200 courses were running, with Alpha was running. Now, by the end of this year, there'll be about 25,000 courses running. Over 2 million people in India have done the Alpha course, and many, many have made a commitment to Jesus Christ. I'm thinking about my time in China just 2 or 3 years ago. I was invited there with Nikki to meet with the government to talk about Alpha and to see if this was something that they could use in the official church there. And when I was there, someone took us into this room far away from the meeting that we were officially in. And we walked in, and there was a group of about 12 or 13 young Chinese. The average age was 22. And we thought, well, what is this all about? And every single one of them said the same thing. They were running an underground church. They were running Alpha, telling their friends about Jesus through the Alpha course. They were saying that every single person had finished the course. That is unheard of in Alpha anywhere in the world. But every single person had finished the course. And they said that every single person had become a Christian by week 2. And that showed me 2 things. One was the hunger that was happening in China. And secondly, that Alpha was a wonderful tool that could be used there to help the people in that wonderful nation. I think, you know, one of the things that we are so excited about with Alpha is how it appeals to young people. At our church, the average age of people coming on Alpha is 26. We have about 1,500 young people coming on Alpha every Wednesday night. And they are people like myself who have been invited by a friend to come on the Alpha course. And I was just thinking of the last course that we ran, one of the last courses we ran in last September. There were 1,500 young people queuing up. This is the group that is most disconnected from the church. Everything that we do with Alpha is aimed at the urban 24-year-old guy. When you see our stand outside, you'll see the person. Alpha is for everyone and anyone. But what we are hoping to do over this next 10 or 20 years is to reach the next generation who are lost from church. You know, that 24-year-old urban guy is completely disconnected from the church, but is most connected digitally around the world. Alpha came to the US in 1996, and there are over about 8,000 courses running here. Bill Hybels is running Alpha at Willow Creek. You know that Willow Creek never run anything that is not homegrown, but for the last 2 years, Bill Hybels has been going around the US and around the world telling everybody to run Alpha and to look it out for their church, because he said he has seen such a huge difference with what's happening within his own church. I'm thinking here in Southern California, Sam told me the other day, 10,000 churches here. We have a huge opportunity in Southern California. Only 130 Alpha courses are running here. So we have a huge, huge opportunity which we would love you to help with. And I think there are 5 things that I have put in the booklet that we would love help with, but I think 3 that I would like to concentrate on today is, number 1, if you don't know about Alpha, I can't tell you everything that's happening now, I've got 20 minutes only, but I would love you to try Alpha if you haven't already. And you can find where there is a local Alpha course running in your area. If you do know about it and you have a heart for it, talk to your local pastor and try to run Alpha at your church. That's another way. We'll train you to do that. And the 3rd way is, I'd love you to help us to connect. You know, we're in 169 countries around the world. We need good leaders. We need people of influence. And if you can help us to meet pastors who you think would love to run Alpha, if you know business people who you think could help us to think more strategically for the next 10 years, we would love you to help us to meet those people. At the end of the day, Alpha is all about people. And I'm thinking about Eddie. Eddie was somebody who we spotted at the end of our church drive. He was homeless, he was a drug addict, he was an alcoholic, and honestly, when you looked at him, he was completely, humanly speaking, beyond hope. We run a homeless shelter at our church, and we invited Eddie, and he gradually began to come. He gradually began to trust us, and we just began to love him and love him. And then we invited him to come on an Alpha course. His whole life was completely and radically changed. And if you're interested, I can show you a picture afterwards of before and now. And what I love about the fact that his life was changed, he had a real heart for the homeless and for the drug addicts and the alcoholics. And a few months ago, he and a few more from our church came out to Los Angeles, and they came and they lived on Skid Row and worked at the rescue mission. And they introduced Alpha, they introduced Jesus through Alpha to the homeless people who are living in Skid Row. And that's what Alpha's all about. It's about changing lives and making it a better place for us all to live. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Tricia. So many wonderful things. To think of the Catholic Church being impacted in that way around the world, it's pretty thrilling. It's just one of many things about Alpha, the massive numbers of people it's reaching. Tricia, by the way, some of you may not know that this morning she told me, this evening she told me she was tired because this morning she caught too many waves in Carlsbad. And trying to paddle past the break was a little tough and kind of beat her up pretty hard, but she was out there surfing with the best of them. So pretty exciting there to see her tennis form at Wimbledon, and then she's out surfing in Carlsbad. So we praise God for your energy and excitement. Lord, we do praise you for Tricia and Alpha, and thank you for what you're doing, amazing things. It just gives us hope and excitement about how you're bringing people all over this planet through all kinds of needs before your throne. Lord, we thank you for Alpha. Bless Alpha, multiply Alpha. And Lord, as I think of the Catholic Church, some of my roots are in that church. Think of what you could do to transform those people. Many of our brothers and sisters, but many of them are not yet. And Alpha is making a huge difference there. And we praise you for that. And we worship you and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.